So now that we have got consent from ChatGPT to record this, I shall begin. We will be utilizing ChatGPT to attempt to learn how to code. We want to learn web development specifically as quickly as possible in a condensed manner, and I believe if we ask it the right way, this should work out. So let us begin. Teach me advanced web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and how to utilize a simple free API of your choosing. Explain it all in a condensed manner through a project that has 3 files, index.html, style CSS, and functions.js, and explain it as if I am a 7-year-old beginner. Let's see what happens. Let's start at the top here. The basics. HTML is like the skeleton of a website. It gives structure and meaning to your content. CSS is like the clothing of a website. It styles the content, making it look good and visually appealing. JavaScript is like the muscles of a website. It adds interactivity and functionality to your website. So again, HTML, structure and meaning. CSS, visually appealing. JavaScript, functionality. Now let's create a simple project that utilizes an API. For this project, we'll use the Chuck Norris Jokes API. This API allows you to retrieve random jokes about Chuck Norris. We'll display these jokes on our website. First, create a new file called index.html. This file will contain the structure of our website. Inside the file, add the following code. So, copy this. If I'm a complete beginner, first off, we're creating a project. I understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but this API, I know I asked it that it should utilize an API, so maybe it assumes that I know what an API is, but it didn't assume that I knew what those were. It gives us this one line. This API allows you to retrieve random jokes about Chuck Norris. So at least we can have that thought in our head if it's our first time really hearing about APIs. So let's continue and just see how far along we could get if we're brand new to this. So we got to copy this code, and we're creating a file called index.html. Again, it didn't tell us where to create this file, but let's just go along with it. I have a code editor. It also didn't mention a code editor, but there's different code editors out there. A code editor allows you to create a file, open a folder with files, make changes to those files. Visual Studio Code is a code editor among many. You can look online for code editors or IDEs, integrated development environments. We are already going beyond ChatGPT. So let's continue. I'm going to open a new folder I'm creating now called Jokes Project. Jokes Project will be opened now. So we want to create a file inside our folder. Let's see what that was called again. We're going to call it index.html. We copied that. We're here, new file, index.html, create file, create it. So now that file is open inside our editor. We can exit out that tab, the Get Started tab. But here we are. We're inside our Jokes Project folder. Our Jokes Project folder has a file, index.html. We're going to paste in the code that was provided to us. We could save, Command S. I go back. It says we're creating index.html. This file is going to contain the structure of our website. We created this file. What is this structure? We see a head, a body, and we see it's all sandwiched into this HTML. So let's see what it says. This code creates a basic HTML structure with a title, a link to the CSS file, a heading, a paragraph, a button, and a script tag that links to our JavaScript file. So very basic stuff. What does this code do? It links to the CSS file. Where do we see that? Well, we see this link here to a CSS file. Just by scanning that, I can see, okay, that makes sense. A heading, here's a heading, an H at least. I don't see the word heading anywhere, but a heading Chuck Norris jokes, that sounds like a heading. That makes sense. A paragraph, here's the P, paragraph probably, it's empty. A button, I see the button, and a script tag. There's the script. So I'm guessing these things are tags. So there's a link tag, body tag, script tag, button. So I could arrive at some idea of how this works. And they did it in this line. Next, they're telling us to create styles.css. This file will contain the styling for our website. Inside the file, add the following code. So again, it's not telling us where to add these files. What if I save one in one place and the other one in a wrong place? But I'm guessing, copy, go back to our code. I could just create another file here. And it's probably going to put it inside of that project. Styles.css. And then we paste that. And it pasted some code here. Save. Command S. Switch back. So it says this file will contain the styling for our website. If we look at what the code looks like, it looks like it's styling the body, styling an H1 tag, styling something joke. We would look back up here. Is there something that says joke? Paragraph that has an ID of joke. It looks like it's empty because usually you have content in between opening or first tags because they haven't used that language, right? They haven't said opening and closing tag, but we know that this get joke is in between the button first tag and the button second tag, opening and closing tags. So back down here, we see this joke, and it might be styling right there where I'm saying where we see this ID of joke. So this code styles the body, the heading, and paragraph of our HTML file. So that's what I just said. We kind of figured it out backwards, but we see the heading here, the H1, the body right there, and the paragraph is probably this thing that says joke. If we go up here, we look at the paragraph, does have that ID of joke. So that's how you probably select from your CSS file certain HTML. You specify it in this syntax or in this CSS rule, right? The rules of CSS are you gotta word things a certain way so that you can select and visually change parts of your HTML file. This code styles the body, the heading, and the paragraph of our HTML file. Finally, create a new file called functions.js. This file will contain the JavaScript code that retrieves the Chuck Norris joke from the API and displays it on our website. Inside the file, add the following code. So let's copy this, and this is going to be our functions.js file. So we go back here, functions.js, paste. What do we got here? We got a function, get joke. And it looks like it does what's inside of here because you see an opening bracket up here and a closing bracket there. Within there we have this other word, fetch. It looks like it's making that call to this API that's going to retrieve a joke. Dot then response. So we're taking part of the response and we're doing something with that response. Then we're grabbing get element by ID. So from this, we're going to grab something in the document. One of these documents, joke, probably HTML, where the paragraph is. Joke element dot inner HTML. We're going to give it that data that it's getting back here from the response. So let's save that. I think that makes sense. Let me go back and see what ChatGPT is saying. So we added the code. This code creates a function called getJoke that retrieves a random Chuck Norris joke from the API using the fetch method. Once the joke is retrieved, it is displayed on the website by updating the HTML of the paragraph element with the ID joke. So as we said, get element by ID. Well, it looks like once it gets this response, we take the response and we place it into our HTML document paragraph with the ID of joke. So it's just telling us what the code does. Now if you open the index HTML file in a web browser, you should see a button labeled get joke. Clicking on this button will retrieve a random Chuck Norris joke from the API and display it on the website. And that's it. You've created a simple web application that retrieves data from an API and displays it on a web page using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Well, let's see if this works. We just open index.html in a web browser. You see, again, you might not know how to do that, but I would say I will want to open this index file. How do I even find that index file? Well, if you're on a Mac like me, I would use Finder, and it should be in here, jokes project, and there is index.html. So I should be able to open this. Chuck Norris jokes, and I get joke. Chuck Norris is a nightmare on Freddy Krueger's street. I like that. That's a good one. Okay, well, what can I say about this? Did I expect more from ChatGPT? I guess I could inquire more. I could be inquiring more as I speak with it. Like if I was really a beginner, then I would probably like explain how functions work. I guess I could do that. Like we've already created the little project and we know it works. If I'm really am a beginner, I'll say, all right, explain your code to me in detail, what every file does and each element and concept that a beginner like me needs to know. Explain HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and APIs through the code project you provided. Let's see what that does. So let's go to the top. So index.html. This file is the main HTML file that contains the structure of our web page. It is the entry point for our web application. It contains the following elements. Doc type HTML. This is the document type declaration, which tells the browser that this is an HTML file. This tag denotes the start of the HTML document. Head. This is a section of the HTML document that contains metadata about the document, such as the title and links to external resources like style sheets and scripts. Title. This tag sets the title of the web page, which appears in the browser tab. Link. This tag specifies the location of the CSS style sheet that will be used to style the HTML elements. Body. This tag contains the main content of the web page, which is visible to the user. H1. This tag creates the heading for the web page. P. This tag creates a paragraph element, which we will use to display the Chuck Norris jokes. There's that P element or P tag. We do see they use tag and element together, which then you'll have the question, are they the same thing or how are they different? But okay, we have button. This tag creates a button element. That's the one that we use to press. Once we press it, it sends a call to the API. Styles.css. So this is the file that contains the style for our web page. It controls visual appearance. The CSS file contains following elements. It has the body element. This selector selects the entire body of the web page and applies the specified styles to it. Font family. This property specifies the font family that should be used for the text on the web page. Text align. This property specifies the alignment of the text on the web page. So basically it's all the visual stuff. And I mean, you guys could read through that. It's kind of lengthy. We know that the joke, this selector selects the paragraph element with the ID joke. We see font size is going to be the size of the text. Margin is going to be the margin of the element. Width, the width of the element. So we're selecting all these things. In our CSS file, we're selecting these things which will be applied to the HTML file. The width of the elements within the HTML file. Max width sets the max width, the border, paddings. We finally get to functions.js, and this contains the JavaScript code that retrieves the Chuck Norris joke. So we have the function getJoke. This is the function that retrieves the Chuck Norris joke from the API and displays it on the web page. We have fetch. This is a built-in JavaScript function. The word built-in means probably that it comes already in JavaScript. Versus what? Well, you probably could create your own function. Like we did here. This function, getJoke, we created it out of thin air. And inside of it, we're utilizing a built-in function of the fetch function, and it allows us to make this HTTP request and retrieve data from the API. This is the URL of the API that we're requesting data from. In this case, it's the Chuck Norris Jokes API. So this is a real website that will, if we copy and paste, gives us an API looking type of page, you see. And that's basically what we're getting, and we're grabbing this value that you see down here. Well, it's stretched out now, but that value is the joke, and we're placing that inside our web page. Once it grabs it and we press the get joke, this is the value. Okay, the .then, this is a JavaScript function that allows us to handle the response from the API. We can use it to transform the data returned by the API into a format that we can use on our web page. We have response.json. This is an arrow function that takes the response from the API and converts it into a JSON object that we can use in our JavaScript code. The JSON object contains the data that the API returns. .then, again, this is another .then function that takes the JSON object returned from the previous .then function and uses it to update the HTML element on our web page. The document.getElementById joke. This function selects the HTML element with the ID joke. In our case, this is the paragraph element where we will display the Chuck Norris joke. We have inner HTML. This property allows us to modify the content of an HTML element. In our case, we use it to display the Chuck Norris joke on the web page. Response value, this is the property of the JSON object that contains the actual Chuck Norris joke. So that's that thing that I was saying. We saw value in that API call, which if we look again, I think it's still saved here. You see, we do get back this JSON object, and in that object, we are selecting value. So when we grab response.value, we're grabbing that value, and we're grabbing the inner HTML and placing it in there after we fetch it. At event listener, this is going to be listening for the click event of the button on click. This property specifies the function that should be called when the button is clicked. In this case, get joke. When the button is clicked, run get joke. Get joke runs the fetch. Fetch is retrieved and inserted into HTML page. So now that we've broken down each file and explained what each element and concept does, let's talk about APIs. APIs, application programming interfaces, are a way for software applications to communicate with each other. In our case, we are using an API to retrieve data, Chuck Norris jokes, from a remote server and display it on our web page. The Chuck Norris Jokes API that we are using is a simple REST API. REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it's a style of software architecture for distributed systems such as the internet. REST APIs use HTTP request and get or retrieve, post or create, put or update, and delete data. So that's what REST applications do. They could get, post, put, delete. In our case, we're using the get request to retrieve data, Chuck Norris jokes, from the API. Overall, understanding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is crucial for web development. HTML is used for structuring the content of a web page. CSS is used for styling the content. JavaScript is used for making the web page dynamic and interactive. APIs allow developers to access data from remote servers, which is essential for creating applications that rely on data from external sources. I hope this explanation helps you understand the code and concepts behind our project. Let me know if you have any further questions. And with that, we will conclude this video. And I hope if you are new to web development, you received value from this. And if so, make sure to subscribe, because I'll be making more videos like this where we'll try to learn more about web development and how it works. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you in the next video.